long before we understood science, people knew something was happening. They opened windows, they washed bedding, they let sunlight in, and they didn't know why, but they knew it mattered. Now, as a former ER nurse with a bachelor's of science, I can tell you they were onto something. Welcome to my lab. So, in 1854, there was a massive cholera outbreak in Soho, London. Cholera is a terrible disease that causes vomiting and diarrhea, and people massively lose so many fluids that quite often it's fatal if they can't replace them in time. And usually you have to go to the hospital for this sort of thing. And unfortunately at the time, people believed that it was caused by something called miasma. It was this miasma theory where people thought that basically foul air or bad smells were causing it. But one physician, Dr. John Snow, he was not convinced. He thought something is hinky going on here. So he started keeping track, just like you would in Law and Order, of where all of these illnesses were taking place. And he noticed the closer it was to this one thing, that there were more illnesses. It was around this one water pump, not the air, the water. Water contaminated by sewage from a nearby house. He convinced officials to remove the handle from the pump, making it so people can't use it, which helped end the outbreak. That moment helped shift us towards something we now take for granted, germ theory. The idea that disease spreads through microorganisms, things we can't see, but we absolutely interact with all the time. So let's very simply break down these things. I'm not going to talk about fungi in this, but fungi plays a part, and I've had many a patient who were treated with antifungal medications with very serious lung infections and other things. But we're just going to talk today about bacteria and viruses. So bacteria are simple living organisms. They can multiply on their own. Viruses are a little bit different. They need a host to replicate. But here's the important part. They don't need much to spread. Surfaces, air, fabric, food, hands. And this is where I think cleaning gets really interesting, because we're not trying to live in some weird sterile plastic bubble. That is silly. That is not realistic. We are trying to reduce the load, because fewer bacteria babies is always a win. And yes, that is the scientific term. No, it's not. So bacteria replicate by splitting in half. They become two ugly little babies. This is called binary fission. So 2 becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes 16, becomes 32. It goes on and on and on. It's exponential. Who knew we'd be using this outside of the high school math class? And under the right conditions, some bacteria can double very quickly, sometimes every hour. So imagine that you could have it very, very quickly. You have a massive amount, some even faster than that. Not always, but given the conditions, the warmth, the moisture, the food, and the time, and they can do very well for themselves, which is honestly quite rude. So the point is not that every surface is instantly dangerous or that every bacteria is necessarily bad, but it's that you do not need a huge amount to start with. And if it's a bad bacteria, you only need a few and some time. And that is why cleaning matters, drying matters, and even refrigeration matters, foreshadowing. And why washing a dishcloth that smells like regret matters. My cat's been playing. They're noisy, so just ignore any sounds. So you might be like, what about viruses? Well, they're different because they don't just multiply on their own on your countertop the way that bacteria can grow under the right conditions. The bacteria actually need a host cell because they're not exactly living, they're more life adjacent, sort of like zombies. But they can survive on surfaces for a long period of time. So they'll just land there and they will just patiently wait for you to come along, and then you're gonna touch it, and then you touch your eyes, your nose, or your mouth. And surprising fact is that a lot of viruses enter the body through the eyes. Who knew? But you know how much I hate the Norwalk virus. That gets in through the mouth, and it usually is from droplets from diarrhea or vomit. Which is why cleaning still matters. You are removing them before they get where you do not want them to go, but where they want to go. And some viruses are especially annoying. Norovirus, Norwalk, my least favorite, one of the main stomach viruses that will take you out 4 days. It is extremely super duper contagious and I hate it. Norovirus spreads so easily. It can survive on surfaces 4 days and it takes very, very little to make someone sick. So when someone in the house has a stomach bug, that is not the time for a vague swipe with a tired sponge. That is the time to actually clean and disinfect. More on that coming up later. But I will tell you, even from working in the emergency department, I have a friend who was caring for a patient with Norwalk, norovirus, and she hugged her husband when she got home. And like, this person did not get vomited on or whatever. She was just in the room with somebody who was experiencing those particular symptoms, and her husband got sick from her clothes. Ew. Mr. Sun, Mr. Golden Sun, kill all the viruses and bacteria. One of the simplest ways that we can reduce microbial survival is sunlight, especially ultraviolet light, which can damage the genetic material inside bacteria and viruses. It damages them and they do not like it. Their instructions get scrambled and that reduces their ability to replicate or to remain infectious. So a simple way to say this is sunlight messes with their instructions, and if they can't follow their instructions, they don't know how to make more of themselves properly. Now, sunlight is not sterilizing your entire house. Let's not get dramatic, but it can reduce survival time. And this is something that the lovely Florence Nightingale, former nurse, understood long before we had the modern science to explain it. She prioritized light and fresh air in hospitals, and now we know that well-lit rooms don't just feel better, they are better. And I will say that the hospital I worked in was not exactly overflowing with windows in some areas. There were some that had no windows, and that was not good. And you felt it, and the patients felt it. It was bad. Can you believe I forgot my glasses? Okay, so if the sun has already damaged a lot of these, then the greatest thing is airflow can help wash them out. You open up the window and then it starts to wash out and dilute the air even more. So we have way less of that darn buildup of those pesky little jerks that like to float around. We're not talking about perfection of sterility, but just reduction. And this is such a theme in cleaning, not perfection, reduction, less buildup, less concentration, less opportunity. We don't want to be full on germaphobes. And I can tell you, since childhood, I have been a very hygiene focused person. When I was like 4, my hands were so dry from washing my hands a lot. It wasn't like obsessive, but I washed them like a lot. So we don't want to be germophobic, but we want to be germ aware. Well, let's talk about textiles or fabrics. This one is easy to overlook, but fabrics hold on to things. Moisture, skin cells, body oils, food residue. Your bedding, your towels, your dishcloths, they are kind of like secret collectors of things we did not ask them to keep, which is why washing matters so much. So water and detergent don't magically make all of these things disappear like a magic wand, but they do something very useful. They help break down the oils, they lift residue, they damage a lot of the viruses and the bacteria if they do happen to survive the laundry process, and then they carry the debris and the microorganisms away by binding to it. So when you wash your bedding, your towels, your cloths, your mop heads, your clothes, your cleaning cloths, you're physically reducing the load. You're damaging them and you're interrupting buildup. You're not making the world or your house germ-free. You're just making it less hospitable for those bad germs. And that matters. A couple of practical things here is that if towels and dishcloths stay damp for long periods, That helps microbes thrive, and I know that you can feel it. Letting wet cloth sit in a heap, it's not ideal. It's basically like handing a pair of microbes like a bottle of wine and some chocolate and saying, don't get up to anything naughty. But they do. They do. That is less cozy home and more tiny microbial resort. And if something smells bad, that is often your clue that microorganisms have been having a little party up there. I hate this part, you guys, but we have to talk about it. And that's biofilm. So the same thing happens on surfaces. Surfaces are constantly being contaminated by hands, by food, by children, by air, by movement, by splashes, by life. And over time, grime builds up. Grease, organic matter, dust, and those layers can support communities of bacteria. They're like a little family and they just keep growing. Of course, as we know from before, they're doubling, which is wonderful, which is honestly the worst kind of community ever. So microorganisms can form a biofilm, which is like a protective slimy layer that helps them stick to surfaces and makes them harder to remove. It's like they're fighting each other's battles. It's sweet if it wasn't so gross. Gross, yes, but useful to understand. Because this is why cleaning is not just cosmetic. Cleaning physically disrupts that buildup before it becomes more established. So it's not just making it shiny, it's let's remove what is feeding this. Let's remove what's protecting this. And let's remove what is sitting here long enough to become really, really gross. And this is where I think a lot of people miss the difference between cleaning and disinfecting. They are not the same thing. So step one, we're gonna clean. This means removing dirt, grease, crumbs, residue, and organic material. Usually with water, detergent, soap, or all-purpose cleaner. This step matters because disinfectants don't work well on the actual dirt. We have to physically remove it. If the counter is greasy or covered in old food residue, spraying something fancy on top and then immediately wiping it off, it's not the triumph that we hoped for. First, you need to clean it. You need to physically remove the grime. It's just like in nursing school we learned, if your hands are soiled at all, you need to wash them. Like you basically always should wash, and people who are obsessed with hand sanitizer, that is not removing stuff. It's maybe killing some of the things, not even all of the things. The second step is to disinfect, and this is when you use something intended to kill microorganisms. If it is something really germy, like if you spilled raw chicken or something, you could use vinegar diluted with water. You do need to be careful with some countertops. Not every situation requires disinfecting though. Quite often, soap is plenty. Even just leaving something sit for a little bit of time works well, but some do. High touch areas during illness, bathroom when someone is sick, food contamination situations, norovirus, totally different story. And that is when disinfection makes so much sense and you gotta get the big guns out. Bleach is not just the name of Nirvana's first album. Bleach is a powerful oxidizer. Very simply put, it damages those important parts of bacteria and viruses. It damages the cell walls in bacteria, the protein and the DNA that we talked about earlier. For viruses, it can damage their outer structure and their genetic material. So bleach does not just move germs around, it chemically breaks down those parts that they need to function. Or more bluntly, bleach just ruins their day. But it has to be used properly. A big one here is contact time. You can't just spray and instantly wipe and assume you have performed some kind of sanitation miracle. Disinfectants usually need to stay wet on the surface for a certain period of time to work properly. And that is one of those deeply annoying facts that is so important that nobody told us about. So first we clean and then we disinfect only if needed. You don't need to be doing any extra disinfecting, believe me, believe me. We don't want to be damaging any of the positive things in our environment. Plus, our immune systems can handle a lot, but not in those cases I mentioned before. So we're gonna let it sit according to the product directions. And no, you do not need bleach on every surface every day, not even close. This is not a hospital isolation room, but during illness, especially gastrointestinal illness like norovirus, disinfecting properly becomes much more important. And the biggest culprits are often not the places that you see. They are the places that you touch. Door handles, light switches, countertops, cabinet pulls, remote controls. But for me, fridge handles and faucets. Absolutely disgusting, because you touch them constantly, often with hands that were just handling raw food. Maybe they were just outside in the big bad world. Dishes, raw chicken, life, chaos, whatever, and then you just move on. So these are the places worth cleaning regularly, not because you're obsessive, but because they accumulate the most contact, and contact is how a lot of this spreads. And then there's dust, which a lot of people think is just sitting there being dusty. But dust is not inert. It contains skin cells, fibers, particles from outside, bits of organic material, and microorganisms, as in bacteria, viruses, fungi. It's basically a transport system, a very gross little shuttle service. You like my bunnies? And if you dry dust in a way that just throws it back in the air, you're not really removing it, you're just relocating it. So practical things here: dust top to bottom. We always clean top to bottom. Use a damp cloth or a microfiber cloth that collects dust. Vacuum regularly. Pay attention to areas where dust settles and collects, because when you remove dust, you are removing what rides on it too. Quick note on food, because this matters too, and I would be remiss as a caring former nurse who just wants to help people be healthier. Bacteria grows fastest in is what called the danger zone, which is roughly between 4 Celsius or 40 Fahrenheit for those who are not on the metric system, and 60 Celsius or 140 Fahrenheit. So room temperature can be a very supportive place for bacteria growth. So leaving food at these temperatures for very long really increases the risk of foodborne illness going off quickly. And remember, this gross stuff can multiply very, very fast. Cold temperatures, though, they don't actually kill most bacteria, they just slow them down. And that is still very useful, because slowing them down means way less rapid multiplication. Instead of like doubling every hour, maybe they only double every day or something like that. And before refrigeration, foodborne illness was much more common because we did not have a reliable way to slow bacterial growth in food. So very practical things: refrigerate your food promptly. Don't leave perishable food sitting out too long. Clean prep surfaces. Be especially careful with raw meat juices. Wash hands after handling risky foods. Again, we're reducing risk. We're not eliminating all risk, reducing it. When we zoom out, this is what we're really doing. Sanitation reduces biological load. It keeps things cleaner and safer, making your homes easier and healthier to live in. You don't need a perfect home. We just need one that works for you instead of against you. Now, Florence Nightingale, who I talked about earlier, she developed an incredible system to help soldiers get healthier during the Crimean War. And I made a video about it, all about that right here, so you can apply it to your house. I hope something great happens for you today. Please subscribe, stay tidy and mighty. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!